I called it. It is junkie
It's
behavior.
totally junkie behavior. All of it. It's like what we've been working on in Draco Chemicus the whole time to try to unpack. We keep seeing the pattern. And I mean, the way you're describing the addicts who are living on the streets, I mean, you could explain why San Francisco has simply opened its gates to people living on the streets and doing drugs. Perfect reflection of the West's. We say, oh, the West is falling. We've let it fall. The barbarians are here. Ah, no, they're us. You guys, you don't get out without us saying it's us. You know, that constant wishing. It's like, oh, if we could only put our sins off onto somebody else. If only we could blame somebody else. Our cities are reflecting our souls perfectly right now. Little girls being given, hookah smoking caterpillars or pharmacia.
Well, we're being drugged for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not just the transgenderism that people are acknowledging exists now, but we've been trans for a long time.
You want to know what pharmacos means?
You know I love a good Greek lesson.
What no one ever recognizes is that Oedipus could not be both incestuous son and parasite and at the same time pharmacos. It's the scapegoat. I do blow my... The pharmacos. When we speak of pharmacos, we mean an innocent victim in the contaminated Judaic and Christian sense. In the sense that we now think of pharmacos now as the medicine. It's exactly what our story is about in Draco Chemicus. The medicine and the poison. It's always been there.
Yeah, so junkies become the scapegoat, even as they scapegoat their trauma into the drug. It's just kind of a chain of scapegoating behavior. Right. The pharmacos, because everybody needs to have one. Everyone needs a pharmacos.
It's throwing it on the drug, which is then the addiction. One of the Substacks I follow is the Midwestern doctor. And he's reposted today an article that he did last year because it keeps becoming topical because we keep having to do this to keep society functioning. I mean, you would say that we have no mythology. We have sacrifices constantly. We have these human sacrifices. We call them abortion and we call them mass shootings. The decades of evidence that antidepressants cause mass shootings. We have seen in the subtitle, as we've seen with the vaccines, almost no social cost can keep a lucrative pharmaceutical off the market. He goes back, he's talking about a book, details some of the side effects, one of which in these antidepressants is akathisia, just feeling like bugs are crawling all over your skin. Restlessness, defined as a psychomotor disorder where it's extremely difficult to stay still. People talk about not feeling like myself, or I'm afraid of some of the unusual impulses I have. And then he gives a list of homicides that people have committed while on or withdrawing from SSRI. Marjorie Taylor Greene was actually talking about this last summer. It was a feature in one of the things trying to point out that shooters that we have are typically on medication. They're been fed demons somehow. I mean, but this is male, 18 years, Prozac. Sister was comatose after a car crash. Violent akathisia for 14 days. Killed his father 4 days after he ran out of pills. Male, 35 years, Paxil. Distressed by on and off relationship with mother of his child. Stabbed former partner 30 plus times to death after 11 weeks of akathisia. Shall I keep going, or have I made my point? I really need Zay's comic of what Christ sees in the garden.
The full horror of civilization. If something's in pill form, it's so trivialized. It's just a pill.
It's like little candy.
You're just taking them like Tic Tacs. It's not like other things, in the old days. You actually were involved in the alchemy, the production of the drug, because you had to process it somehow before you were going to take it. Now it's just a little Tic Tac. Could you talk about masks? Hides the fullness of what is actually happening at the time. That's what I meant by people not being loved properly.
Right.
And when I mean accepted, I don't mean accepted like, yeah, we're going to accept you for who you are. If I was talking to a hardcore heroin addict, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I accept you having this addiction to heroin. People possessed by demons are scary, and they do terrifying things, and they do traumatic things to other people.
Oh yeah, the list of things in this article that the Midwestern doctor posted is just, wow. It's interesting that doesn't get in the collective consciousness. It's like you get these occasional events of public shootings, but these, I mean, that the list of people that have murdered their own family members was quite wrenching. Obviously, a lot of the shootings that happen in Chicago, they're gang related, but those gangs are driven by drug trade.
Yeah,
which everybody knows.
And then, of course, everyone can say, oh, well, they're just disgusting human beings, and that, they've decided to do it, so who cares? Let them shoot each other, they're dogs, whatever. How many times have you taken coke at a party? Like, everyone knows I was out about it. I don't think I've ever been in the closet about this, like, I was a raver. I participated in this industry.
Well, the reality is we've all participated in this. Here, I'm going to have another glass of wine. Yeah. The nice drugs that people take that you see advertised on television, you're part of it too.
Well, that's the thing. As ravers, we know we're participating in black market exchange. I think the issue is that when it becomes a laboratory experience and suddenly it's sanitized, that whitewashing, the whitewash tomb. Yeah, it's all right.
There's the myth.
It's RX.
It's RX.
It's all right.
It's
just
it's clean. It's that ritual we do to commemorate the god giving us civilization. The myth is still with us. And that's Gerard's great, realization is saying we don't get away from religion, right? Religion isn't the cute stuff that you keep in the closet of culture and say, oh, we outgrew all of that. It's the dark. It's the reality of the way we create society. And his problem, his psychological problem, is that we do this to each other because we're constantly coveting what the other desires. So he does a good job on the 10th commandment saying, do not covet your neighbor's anything. Because in fact, that's what drives all of this. It drives the need for ritual and sacrifice ultimately, because people get caught up in these envious spirals.
Well, we're going to talk about drugs and drug policy, so of course I had to talk about this. Unapologetically in favor of full decriminalization and legalization of cannabis with absolutely no regulation whatsoever, which would sound really irresponsible until you understand most cultures don't have the problems with cannabis abuse that we seem to be manifesting now. I don't want to scapegoat people anymore. I don't want to scapegoat non-violent drug offenders anymore. I think it's a heinous crime against people to give them a criminal record for using something that needs no processing and needs no supply chain. I'm not talking about pills, I'm not talking about powders, I'm just talking about a plant that grows anywhere, can grow anywhere, almost all over the face of planet Earth. To me, it seems as simple as treating it the same way that we treat dandelions or any other kind of things that grow freely, and approaching people's overuse of this thing as a medical problem. Not medical in the sense of RX, but probably reframe this a little better. As a spiritual problem.
It's like, I think our own metaphor of ship is useful because we have no stable ground, it feels like. We're always floating around. No. Oh no, we can't land there.
The poverty of the language that we've been using for so long.
We have nothing but pirates.
My position on this is that I grew up in the era where, it was the panic over the gateway drug. They weren't kidding. But that's because the only dispensaries that were available were black market, and they were the same places that you would go and get speed and heroin and pills. Society's been pushed into a mode of deciding that particular substances are legal and acceptable and others are unacceptable and illegal, and created this left-right mechanism and the rivalry around that. They want to get high in a socially unacceptable way, so now they have to go out into the tombs. Go get stoned out in the tombs. You can't stay in here with us. I first saw that sign when I was in Bologna, walking along the street, just randomly enjoying my walk through the city. And of course I was really surprised. Oh, what's that on the ground? You've got to be kidding me. Did someone put that there as a joke? I asked around and I started to look it up. There are all of these mosaics there because the streets of Bologna, beautiful old walkways that they constructed, were also outdoor markets. So because it's the medieval city, so about Bologna, but they had all these beautiful outdoor markets. So they had the signs in mosaic on the pavement saying, what was sold in each place. And then I saw this little one that said cannabis protectio. And that same thing is written in a few places all over Bologna. So apparently it was a big part of the Bologna trade. They traded hemp products. The majority of the hemp trading wasn't for pharmacological use. It was for industrial textile products, for shipping, ship sales, rope oils and that kind of thing. But the Italians were trading it. They were trading it in Bologna. They've described it as protective. Right. It wasn't demonized. It wasn't prohibited substance that was given this demonic attribute to it. A civilization that made these beautiful buildings that had this amazing culture, they were trading this on the streets. And then I thought about it, what were we doing in contrast to this? Western civilization in the New World had like a good 50 years where people were getting incarcerated for playing with a plant that could potentially create completely new industries, completely new textiles. I mean, even paint can be made from it. So it just didn't gel with me at all. So I always have arguments with people about it because I think this is something that has been put into the category of pharmacos when it doesn't belong there.
Well, pharmacos is always both. That's our twinning problem in Draco Alchemicus as well. Medicine and poison.
Well, true. The dose makes the poison.
What the demoniac story shows is that society somehow needs the addicts either in prison or on the street and undead because they're living in the tombs. They're no longer part of the community. What I've learned in this meditation and watching the way people behave this week and talking about what happened in the school, it's easy to say because it's politically true, but everybody needs it. All sides need these events. The demoniac story shows how the effect on the people that they're feeding off of, and what Gerard keeps mulling over is like, golly, is there a way out? We're always going to end up in these spirals of rivalry and scapegoating. It scales up and down, right? It's like your own little friend community will splinter over this kind of thing. We watch it play out constantly in the social media world, right? Not going to debate you, sorry.
We want the gladiatorial combat. We want to be able to sit in the stadium, watch the gladiators bleed.
Another Substack, the Contemplations on the Tree of Woe, was contemplating woefully what fall of civilization looks like. He was looking at, ships, our hip imagery there, because they were making ship ropes, among other things, with the hip. See, he has a graph, and it goes choop, choop, right there. It's like big mountain peak, right? And the top of the graph, the peak of the graph is numbers of shipwreck discovered in archaeologically for the period around the birth of Christ. Peak of the empire. The Augustan, Pax Romana. Contemplations on the Tree of Woe was using it for, was saying, this is what the fall of civilization looks like. No more commerce. It vanishes. It's Alexander Macree's is Substack, but he's doing that to say, look, we could fall, right? The civilization could just crash completely, and you have no more, physical comforts. You have actually, on the opposite side, you don't have like giant surveillance state anymore. Oh well, guess that's going to be over
because you don't have a state, let alone a surveillance state.
All the tech's not going to work if we don't have the gladiatorial games. But to consider that, that peak of the empire was this peak of amazing cruelty and scapegoating. They are a slave world. We know that. Christ is crucified because that's what they did to the ones that they wanted to like make an example of. Don't be a thief. Don't be a rebel. You're going to be humiliated, stripped naked, and stuck on a cross. St. Nunefraga's illustrated a book on Marcus Aurelius, which is very, very powerfully done. And there's a crucifixion scene that he put in there. It's like, the slaves are being crucified. It's not a pretty death. That's the entire point of it. And that was the peak of the empire. All of this mimetic rivalry issued into ritual sacrifice, one way or another, either executions or war. Zay's book with Marcus Aurelius has a lot of very powerful military scenes, and Marcus Aurelius, the famous stoic good emperor, right? That a good part of his reign is dealing with border war and pacification of the Eastern Empire and so forth. This is your empire. This is your empire. This is our empire. This is the American empire. This is the blood sacrifice that empires make. And it was the poppy stuff that started me on all this spice meditation last summer because of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the poppy fields.
I remember too when you were like, it's the spice.
It's the spice. I figured it out. What drives the empire? Oh, right. Frank Herbert really knew what he was talking about. It's the spice. Yeah. What spice? Yeah. Oh, right. In Dune, it's the spice they need for navigation, appropriately enough, right? There are ships that are sailing through the cosmos.
So we've got one that comes from a plant and others that may come from rocks. The empire needs sacrifices. We've got a different kind of empire, forthright with its crucifixions.
But the thing is, what Gerard would say is nobody ever is. I think this is probably true of the Romans in their day, and sometimes this is dramatized well in our theater. The people walking past all those crucified slaves on the Appian Way didn't have compassion for them. Are you kidding? They saw them as dangerous rebels. Of course they should be executed. The slaves, you can't let your slaves behave that way. String them up. You got people that tried to, overthrow your government, stick them in prison. What do they do? Oh, doesn't matter. They're not innocent. And the cry for that kind of execution is relentless to this day. I mean, we're seeing it on the social media, right? So-and-so should be shot. Take all those Christians and shoot them. Wait, are we in the Roman Empire or what? Got guns, but, the sorrow of all of this is we're no different. Right? Civilization is as it has always been. We have great tech right now. The Romans had pretty cool tech. They had glass blowing. Did I tell you that? I think we're in the glass empire. We have been in the glass empire since, in Syria, Palestine, around the birth of Christ, they discover blown glass. We're in it still. That story, the glass story. Speaking to you on, glass cables right now, in glass, in light. It's like that we are still part of that imperial network.